The art of escape. I never told anyone about the day I discovered my hands could create beauty. The same day I learned that cruelty had no limits at Hogwarts. The autumn of 1971 clings to my memory like wet parchment to stone. I was 11, barely 2 months into my first year at Hogwarts, and already I understood that magic school was just another battlefield. Only this time the weapons were words sharp enough to cut deeper than any blade. I remember standing at my dormitory trunk that Tuesday morning, November 16th, watching my dormmates laugh at jokes I wasn't part of while they prepared for the day ahead. Mulciber was already bragging about the Slytherin Quidditch team's latest practice, though first years weren't allowed to try out. Avery was comparing the expensive quills his father had sent him. Their conversations flowed around me like water around a stone, present but untouchable. My own quill was a simple black feather, nothing special. My robes were second-hand, carefully mended by my mother's steady hands. My books were the standard required texts, no leather-bound editions or golden embossing. Everything about me screamed different in a place where difference was often mistaken for weakness. The morning started like any other, Transfiguration with Professor Grimthorne, where I'd successfully turned my matchstick into a needle on the second try. Impressive for a first year, though no one seemed to notice. Then Charms with Professor Thistletorn, where I'd made my feather float higher than most, earning a brief, reluctant nod of approval that felt like sunlight through storm clouds. But it was during the break between classes that everything changed. I was at my locker, a narrow metal compartment in the dungeon corridors where we stored our books between lessons. The hallway was crowded with students rushing to their next classes, voices echoing off the stone walls in a cacophony of teenage energy. I was carefully organizing my books, making sure my potions essay was safely tucked away when I heard the familiar snicker behind me. "Look at Snivelus," chained the voice of James Potter, somehow managing to pack years of disdain into those 3 words. Still playing with his little books, like a good boy. I should have ignored him. I should have closed my locker and walked away. But at 11 years old, with the weight of not belonging pressing down on my shoulders like a lead cloak, I made the mistake of turning around. Potter stood there with his perfect messy hair and his confident smirk, flanked by disdainful Sirius Black and Remus Lupin. Even then they moved like a pack, complete and unbreakable. Everything I wasn't. "Leave me alone, Potter," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Oh, he speaks." Black laughed, that bark-like sound that would haunt my dreams for years. "Tell us, Snivelus, what's it like being the only first year who still sleeps with a teddy bear?" Heat flooded my cheeks. "I don't." "My mistake," Potter grinned, pulling out his wand with practiced ease. "It's probably just your blanket, you know, the one with the holes in it." The spell hit me before I could react. Evanesco, a vanishing spell I wouldn't learn until 3rd year. My school bag simply disappeared. Books, parchment, quills, ink, everything scattered across the stone floor in a chaos of homework and supplies. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was my sketchbook, a small leather-bound, unhappy journal I'd hidden at the very bottom of my bag. It had been my mother's, filled with her own drawings of flowers and landscapes from her youth. I'd been adding my own sketches to the empty pages, small drawings of castle corridors and potion ingredients, nothing I thought anyone would ever see. The book fell open as it hit the ground, its pages fluttering like wounded wings. My drawings were exposed for everyone to see, rough sketches of Professor Slughorn's greenhouse, detailed studies of beetle eyes and unicorn hair, and on one page, a careful drawing of my mother's hands as she tended our small garden back in Spinner's End. The hallway fell silent. Then the laughter began. Unhappy. "Nay. Oh, this is rich," Potter crowed, levitating the sketchbook so everyone could see. "Snivelas draws pictures. Look at this one. Is that supposed to be a flower? My sister could do better, and she's 7. Maybe he's practicing for his future career," Black added with vicious glee. "Portrait painter for squibs disgusted who can't afford wizarding photographs." Students began to gather, drawn by the commotion. I watched in horror as my private world, the one place where I felt capable, where my hands could create something beautiful, was held up for mockery. Someone laughed at my drawing of a cauldron bubbling with carefully shaded steam. Another student pointed at my sketch of the great hall's ceiling, calling it wonky. "Please," I whispered, reaching for the book. "Give it back." Potter danced backward, still holding my sketchbook aloft. "What's the magic word, Snivelas?" "Please," I repeated, hating how small my voice sounded. "I don't think he means it," Black said thoughtfully. "Maybe we should give everyone a better look. What do you think, Mooney?" Lupin looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. In my memory, his silence cuts deeper than the others' laughter. Potter began turning the pages with his wand, displaying each drawing for the growing crowd. My careful study of Professor Grimthorne's calico cat transformation, my attempt to capture the way sunlight streamed through the potions classroom windows, a half-finished sketch of the castle grounds that I'd been working on for weeks. "Is this supposed to be Hogwarts?" someone called out. "It looks like a pile of rocks." "Maybe that's how it looks from the bottom," another voice added, and the laughter grew louder. I felt something inside me break, not cleanly, like a snapped wand, but messily, like fabric tearing. The shame was a living thing, crawling up my throat and burning behind my eyes. This was supposed to be my sanctuary, my one skill that had nothing to do with magic or money or pure blood status, and they were destroying it with their laughter. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Potter let the book fall. It hit the stone floor with a sound like in a hurry tone, breaking bones, and I scrambled to collect it along with my scattered supplies. My hands shook as I gathered loose pages, some of them torn, all of them trampled by careless feet. The crowd dispersed, moving on to their next classes with the casual cruelty of children who don't understand the weight of their actions. Potter and his friends disappeared around a corner, their laughter echoing off the stone walls like a curse. I was alone in the corridor, kneeling on cold stone, holding the remains of my private world. In that moment of complete despair, I closed my eyes and whispered the only prayer I knew, the simple words my mother had taught me when I was small. "God, please, just help me disappear." It was barely a breath lost in the echo of footsteps, but somehow saying it made the weight in my chest a little lighter. That afternoon I skipped Defense Against the Dark Arts with Professor Ravencrest. I couldn't bear to sit in another classroom, to pretend that nothing had happened, to act as though my insides weren't raw and bleeding. Instead, I made my way out of the castle, past the greenhouses and the Quidditch pitch, to a small meadow I'd discovered during one of my solitary walks. It was a hidden place, tucked between the edge of the forbidden forest and a small hill that blocked it from view of the castle. Wild grass grew in gentle waves, and a few stubborn wildflowers still bloomed despite the approaching winter. It was the kind of place that seemed to exist outside of time, untouched by the petty cruelties of school life. I sat down heavily, pulling my damaged sketchbook from my bag. Some of the pages were beyond saving, but others could be smoothed out, their torn edges carefully aligned. I had my quill and a small bottle of ink, the same simple supplies that had been mocked just hours before. For a long time I just sat there, watching the grass move in the wind. The silence was different here, not the oppressive quiet of being ignored, but the peaceful silence of being alone by choice. No one to judge, no one to laugh, no one to remind me that I didn't belong. Almost without thinking, I dipped my quill in ink and began to draw. It started as simple lines, the curve of the hill, the jagged edge of the forest, the way the grass seemed to flow like water. But as I worked, something strange happened. The humiliation began to fade, not disappearing entirely, but becoming smaller, more manageable. Each stroke of my quill was an act of defiance against Potter's laughter, against Black's cruelty, against the whole school's indifference. I drew the meadow as I saw it, not as others might see it, but as it felt to me. A sanctuary, a place where difference wasn't a weakness, but a way of seeing the world that others missed. I added details that only I would notice, the way one patch of grass caught the light differently, the small purple flowers hiding near the forest edge, the particular shape of the clouds gathering overhead. As I worked, I found myself thinking about my mother's kitchen back home. She had a way of making even the simplest meals feel like magic, not the wand-waving kind, but the everyday miracle of turning basic ingredients into something nourishing and good. I thought about how she'd taught me to notice the small things, which herbs grew best in shade, how to tell when bread was ready by its smell, the way butter changed color as it melted in a hot pan. Maybe that was it. Maybe my real talent wasn't just in drawing, but in seeing, in noticing the details that others overlooked, the beauty that hid in plain sight. The sun was beginning to set by the time I finished the sketch. My hand was cramped from holding the quill, and I had ink stains on my fingers, but I felt lighter somehow. The drawing wasn't perfect. I could see a dozen flaws, places where the proportions were off, or the shading didn't quite capture what I'd intended. But it was mine. It was true. I looked at the paper, then at the real meadow around me, and realized something profound. I had forgotten to be sad. For hours, I had been completely absorbed in the act of creation, and the humiliation of the morning had faded to a dull ache, rather than the sharp agony it had been. Not erased, I would never forget the sound of their laughter, or the way my private world had been exposed and mocked, but transformed somehow into something I could carry without being crushed by its weight. As I walked back to the castle, my sketchbook safely tucked away, I made myself a promise. I would continue to draw, continue to see the world through my own eyes rather than through the lens of others' expectations. Let them mock my shabby robes and my second-hand books. Let them laugh at my greasy hair and my sharp tongue. They could take away my dignity in the corridors, but they could never touch this ability to find beauty in hidden places, to create something meaningful from nothing more than ink and parchment and careful observation. That night, as I lay in my narrow dormitory bed listening to my roommate's quiet breathing, I thought about the meadow, about the way the light had fallen across the grass, and how I had captured just a fraction of its beauty on paper. Tomorrow there would be more classes, more opportunities for humiliation, more reminders that I was different. But there would also be more chances to escape, to find those quiet moments where difference became strength rather than weakness. More opportunities to practice the art that no one could take from me, even if they tried. I fell asleep that night with ink still staining my fingers, and for the first time since arriving at Hogwarts, I didn't dream of home. I dreamed of undiscovered meadows and perfect light, of drawings yet to be made and beauty yet to be found. In the darkness of the dormitory, I smiled. They could call me snivelous. They could mock my appearance and my poverty and my fierce need for solitude. But they would never understand that their cruelty had given me the greatest gift of all, the absolute certainty that I could survive anything, as long as I never lost the ability to see the world through my own eyes. And someday, though I didn't know it then, that particular way of seeing would save more lives than any of Potter's heroics or Black's bravery ever could. But that's a different story for a different time. This story is about a frightened first-year boy who discovered that his hands could create beauty, and that sometimes the most powerful magic of all is the simple act of refusing to let others define who you are. The meadow is still there, you know. hidden between the forest and the hill, waiting for anyone brave enough to look beyond the obvious, patient enough to sit in silence, and honest enough to see the world as it really is, rather than as others insist it should be. I should know I've been back in... But that first drawing I made that day, the one of the meadow that saved me from drowning in humiliation, I kept it. Through 7 years of Hogwarts, through the war, through everything that came after. It's yellowed now, the ink faded, the edges worn from being folded and unfolded countless times. And it's not the only one I kept. You see, that afternoon didn't just teach me about art or resilience or finding beauty in hidden places. It taught me about the weight of secrets and how some memories become so precious that you carry them with you no matter how much they hurt. Because later that year, something happened in that very same meadow. Something that would change everything I thought I knew about friendship, about loyalty, about the difference between love and obsession. A moment so perfect and so terrible that even now, decades later, I can close my eyes and feel the exact temperature of the air, smell the exact scent of the grass, hear the exact words that were spoken, words that would echo through every choice I made afterward. Some people think the most important moments announce themselves with fanfare and thunder. But the truth is, the moments that truly matter often arrive quietly, disguised as ordinary afternoons in forgotten places. They slip into your life wearing the mask of coincidence, and by the time you recognize them for what they are, they've already rewritten your entire story. That day in the meadow was just the beginning. The real story, the one that would define everything I became, was still waiting to unfold. And when someone asks me years from now if I regret the choices that followed, if I would change the path that led from that lonely first-year boy to the man I became, my answer will always be the same. Always. That was the first time ink made me feel like I belonged somewhere. Even if it was just a piece of parchment, but the forest remembers, and so do I. Do you? Shall I continue next time?